All right, it's a couple minutes after 1, so we need to get started. Our next speaker is Tristan Casabianca. He's a respected historian and alumnus of Marseille University and the University of Hamburg, and he brings his expertise in the history of law to the Shroud. He's contributed to critical Shroud research, particularly around the authenticity of the artifact and the reanalysis of the results of the radiocarbon dating. Let's welcome Tristan.
Okay. So, today we are going to delve into this debate, and our question will address, the main question will be, is the Shroud of Turin the authentic burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth, or is it a medieval creation? And drawing on recent studies, we will examine the scientific, historical, and methodological dimensions of this controversy. So, let's begin with this, with two main questions that I'm going to have with you. Is there credible, serious research on the Shroud of Turin? And the second one, the second part of the talk will be, is the belief that the Shroud of Turin is the burial cloth of Jesus, is this belief justified? So, let's start with the first question. Is there serious research on the Shroud of Turin? It's maybe a little bit provocative, but let's study this. You know, we are going to delve into syndonology. What is syndonology? It is the scholarly study of the Shroud of Turin, and it occupies a unique and often controversial place in the academic discourse. Syndonology, of course, as you know it, maybe from, many of you know it, it comes from the ancient Greeks, syndon, which means shroud. But unlike any other artifact, the shroud has inspired the creation of a field focused exclusively on its analysis. And we have critiques such as Italian professor Andrea Nicolotti, and his general impression is that all what we call syndonology falls entirely into the category of pseudoscience, influenced by a predetermined agenda, and that those involved make no effort to dissociate themselves from the pseudoscience. And this thesis is shared by someone, maybe you don't know him because he is quite known in the field. It is a French researcher. His name is Nicolas Sarzeau, and he has published recently a book in 2024 after his PhD thesis in medieval art and sociology, a mix of two. And the book is called Les suaires du Christ en Occident. And he said that syndonology has invented a methodological arsenal applied to a single object, and with separate methods, one obtains separate results. One ends up proving what was initially assumed, namely that the shroud is an incomparable object. That is in his book, only in French. And the book by Andrea Nicolotti was published in English in 2020, I think. It is an update of his book that was published in 2015 in Italian. And you have to look at it because you will have a lengthy treatment from a skeptic, and it is interesting even if you are partisan of the authenticity. So this characterization that by Nicolotti and Sarzeau is overly simplistic. Let's begin by questioning ourselves about who a syndonologist is. When you read Nicolotti, and Sarzo, they reserve the term for pro-authenticity scholars, even when they are professional historians and scientists publishing in peer-reviewed journals. We can give two examples. For example, Nicolotti, when he speaks about the amateur syndonologist John Marco Rinaldi, does not speak of John Marco Rinaldi as a syndonologist, because, I mean, the main reason, the core reason is that because John Marco Rinaldi is a partisan of medieval faith, so he doesn't call it a syndonologist. And we have also, I mean, the most troubling, maybe you don't know him, and I don't have put his name here, but there is a French researcher, his name is Paul-Éric Blanru, and he is also, Nicolotti says it is the most prestigious French researcher on the Shroud of Turin, but Paul-Éric Blanru is, he held negationist views, and he's a very controversial personage, but you cannot guess it when you read Nicolotti's work. So that's how troubling it is. So cherry picking also is one good example of what we can call a two-sided mirror. In his most recent book, Italian chemist Luigi Galascelli, a book published last year in Italian, remains silent on criticism regarding his image formation hypothesis. And thus, omissions are not exclusive to one side of the debate. And in 2021, I published an article on the Pre-Codex and on how Turin Shroud scholars had engaged with it. And the main goal of this article was, the main question was, did the image represent or evoke the Turin Shroud? And I was surprised to discover how close to hyper-criticism Nicolotti's work was. At first glance, when you read the book, it's quite impressive, it seems okay. And you have all the blurbs from renowned historians telling you how incredible this work is. But when you delve into it, when you discover really how biased it is. In fact, syndonology is best understood not as a pseudoscience, but as a multidisciplinary container, as Gian Maria Zaccone, Italian historian, put it. So we can say that the syndonology, it integrates a broad range of expertise, archaeology, chemistry, forensic pathology, textile analysis, history, statistics, and it's maybe a little bit like Egyptology, if you want an example. It's not a science per se, but rather a framework in which experts apply the methods of their disciplines to the study of a singular and complex object. This is the simplest definition and probably the better. Another way to put this division between syndonology and this alleged division between syndonology and real science is to claim, as French medieval historian Nicolas Guyard recently wrote, that dialogue has broken down between the world of syndonology and the academic world. And he says that two worlds now coexist, each with its own conferences and publication. But that's not at all accurate. We can give some recent counter-example of this academic dialogue. First one that I know quite well is related to Oxford Journal Archaeometry. Over recent years, Archaeometry has published 4 original articles about the Shroud of Turin, and one is even quite favorable to the thesis of authenticity. It is the article published by palynologist Marcia Boy on Poland. And of course, we published in 2019 the article about radiocarbon dating showing the lack of validity of the radiocarbon dating done by the laboratories in 1988. And last year, there was an article published by someone who is called, I mean, I don't know, you won't find his name there, but his name is Elio Quiroga Rodriguez, and he published an original article also in archaeometry about the alleged anatomical distortions of the man of the shroud. And we had the opportunity to publish a commentary some months ago in archaeometry that was accepted in archaeometry. It's a commentary showing the lack of reliability of his conclusion. So that's an example of an efficient and of a good academic dialogue with the Shroud of Turin works. Another example could be this one. This one was 7 years ago, and there was, Matteo Borini and Luigi Galascelli pretended to show the inaccuracies of the blood flows, and 3 comments were with the author's responses were published in naturally a quite good journal, peer-reviewed journal of forensic science. So, what is even more interesting is that new researchers are involved now. Not amateur syndonologists or scholars such as Nicolotti. Nicolotti has built his academic career on the Turin Shroud. I mentioned on this slide, two original articles by a German forensic pathologist published in International Journal of Legal Medicine in 2023 and 2024. Very interesting articles. And another one that comes immediately into my mind is an article published by a professor of chemistry and specialized also in textile, Ioannis Karapanagiotis, and he published a literature review of all the Shroud of Turin controversy in this review, Textiles, some months ago. And it is really a good article if you want to have a kind of summary of all the academic controversy. So, and so, despite, the tensions about the nature of syndonology, and despite many publications in predatory journals who attack its a priori trustworthiness, that's one side, unfortunately, of the problem, syndonology continues to emerge every year with credible and rigorous work. And recent years have seen increased publication of shroud-related research in high quality and peer-reviewed journals. You can find here some articles and chapters of books that were published. One good example is by biblical scholar Dale Allison. He is maybe the liberal side, let's call it, of the biblical scholars, and he published a book about the resurrection of Jesus and apologetics and controversy around it. And he has a chapter in it devoted entirely on the Shroud of Turin, and it is quite, of course, he says literally that he is leaning towards the medieval hypothesis, just leaning towards, not just opposed entirely of the authenticity hypothesis. So, based on this, we can do an evaluation of the two main hypotheses regarding the age of the cloth and the cause of the image formation, the medieval hypothesis, and what we can call the authenticity hypothesis. And more on this distinction later. And because those reviews of scientific literature support, the existence, of course, of an academic dialogue. So, to evaluate the shroud of authenticity, researchers employ diverse methods. And we are going to delve into those methods. Intuitive assessment of the hypothesis, quantitative approach, historiographical approach, argument mapping, and heuristics improved with Bayesian approach. Let's start with the logical structure of the argument. It is a figure that was published in the summary article that was published by, that was authored by Schwalbe and Rogers and published in Analytica Chimica Acta in 1982. And you see, they presented the review article of the STUP findings, and you can see the logical structure of the argument regarding the image formation hypothesis. Let's start with the intuitive approach. The intuitive approach is the most obvious approach. It is, let's call it a mixture of knowledge, of history and prejudices. It is still in use, for example, to detect fakes in art or to make attributions. And of course, it has to be taken with caution because you have clearly a confirmation, a danger of confirmation bias, and it lacks objectivity. But you can find a good example in Turin trial studies with the opinion of textile expert Mechtil Fleury-Lemberg. And for her, the Prey Codex, for example, when she looks at the Prey Codex as a textile expert, she says that it is a remarkable source, much more significant than any comparison with an ancient artifact could be, and for the textile historian, it is equally powerful. So it is an intuitive, let's call it an intuitive approach. It is based on the experience of the expert. And this approach should be taken in consideration because as philosopher of history, Christopher Behan McCulloch has put it, to refuse it would deprive historical scholarship of remarkable insights by learned scholars, and that would be a high price to pay for the right to check all inferences before believing them. So we can continue with another approach, because the danger with this intuitive approach is, can you really have a fruitful dialogue in such a controversial matter with this intuitive approach? Someone will say, oh, I'm convinced that it is true, and the other one will say, oh, I'm convinced that it is false, and the end of the story and end of the dialogue. So we have to use some quantitative approach, and they have emerged since the 1980s. The most well-known is that was, for example, by the Wengers published in Applied Optics in 1985. They were looking for points of congruence between the first Byzantine coin and the facial image of Jesus. Giulio Fanti was also into that, and I was looking also of this, with the Prey Codex, how many points of congruence you can find between the representation of this medieval manuscript and the Turin Shroud. But you have to pay attention because the subjectivity in the detection of common features in art is really, should never be neglected. There is high subjectivity it could be really arbitrary. And you have also quantitative approaches that are, for example, put forward by Bruno Barberis. He tried to have some probabilities and with a global assessment of the authenticity hypothesis, and by multiplying the main characteristics of the shroud, and telling you that you have a very low probability of the shroud, for the shroud of being a medieval forgery. But you have to take this. You have to take this with caution also, because what you will have is to. You will have to face the problem of of the lowest probability that you have when you are accumulating such low numbers. So, 15 years ago, in order to counter this type of objections, I decided to use a historiographical methodology already in use and to apply it to the Shroud of Turin. It's called the minimal facts approach. What it is, you take the uncontroversial facts and evidence about the Shroud of Turin, you apply on them, the traditional historiographical criteria. That is plausibility. Does our knowledge in other fields reinforce the hypothesis? Explanatory scope and explanatory power. Less ad hoc, you are maybe most familiar with that because it includes the criterion of simplicity. Does the hypothesis rely on unverified data? And illumination, what we call illumination. Does the hypothesis shed light on other widely accepted phenomena? You test this on medieval, natural, and resurrection hypotheses. The medieval hypothesis is the best one, according to me and many researchers. That is the one that was proposed by Luigi Gardaschelli. You test this on the natural hypothesis, that is the hypothesis that it was the real body of Jesus, but without any supernatural intervention, and you have also, naturally, the resurrection hypothesis. The inconvenience of this minimal facts approach, it comes from its strength, because it does not even take into account the real presence, for example, of blood, or the presence of a real human being wrapped in the Turin shroud, and it excludes the C14 results. Too controversial for a minimal facts approach. The result is in favor of the resurrection hypothesis. That was my work that was published 12 years ago in iTrop journal. My first published work in a peer-reviewed journal. And you see immediately that F it's for fails and P it's for passes. And you see immediately that the medieval hypothesis, it's highly unlikely when you use this minimal facts approach. It fails everywhere. But between the resurrection hypothesis and the natural hypothesis, it's a little bit more close, but you have, according to me, a good probability for the resurrection hypothesis. And I won't delve into that, but if you have some question later. So, we have also, nowadays, a new analytical argument that was developed by Douglas Walton. Who is Douglas Walton? Douglas Walton is a professor of rhetoric. He passed away, unfortunately. He was a professor of rhetoric at the University of Windsor. And he used what he called a heuristic technique. What is heuristic technique? He used an argument diagram that is an inferential device. He describes it that way. An inferential device that enables a person to rapidly jump to a tentative conclusion where a decision needs to be made in a situation of uncertainty. It's heuristic. And he used as an example in his book that he published the Turin shroud controversy to show how to solve a controversial case. And what was his conclusion? It was that the Turin shroud was a medieval forgery. Let's go deeper into this. That is what he was calling a simple tool. I mean, and you see that it's not so simple immediately. So, and he used this, and so despite the promise, I mean, it's quite complex. You have to look. The diagram must be read from right to left. At the left, you have the final conclusion, and you have all these arrows pointing at, into the final sentence, which is final assertion, which is the clause is the burial shroud of Jesus, supported or not by all the boxes. And you have with X and X there, you have the boxes that are supported by the opinion of the experts or not. So, and this argument diagram was just an example in the mind of Douglas Walton, and it relies on many incorrect facts showing that he was not familiar with the Shroud of Turin, especially that he was not familiar with the radiocarbon dating. And in his book, he said something interesting. He said that if some evidence for the repair hypothesis were given, for example, based on expert opinions of scientists who had examined the shroud in the repair fragment, it could be a very strong counter-argument and might defeat the network of pro-arguments supporting the ultimate claim at issue. So, with an argument diagram, that was an idea that I had in 2017, and I presented this idea in the PASCO conference. With an argument diagram, a convincing case in favor of the authenticity can also be made. And I proposed in the PASCO conference this approach, and in December 2024, I'm going to maybe to skip this, and to focus on this, due to the, and we can build an argument map and weighing the argument. We can propose an argument diagram with 18 propositions that you can see there on the right, and all the 18 propositions are better that way. There, quite independent, with or without the expert's opinion, and a second part of the argument, it's the B proposition. Let's say the big one that comes from there, and two favorable two in favor of the medieval hypothesis and two against the medieval hypothesis, and it gives you support or not in favor of the final conclusion. The Shroud of Turin is the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. So now, and you attach to each of these assertions some probability. When it is supported by the opinion of the expert, by the consensus of the expert, you attach a probability and of 0.9, and when it is just unsupported, common but unsupported by the consensus of the expert, just 0.7. Those numbers are arbitrary, of course, but it's just to give an idea, because we are talking about heuristic. It's just to give you an idea, to give you a heuristic idea of what is going on. And what is, you have this, and you can see on the table that those probability attached to each proposal. I mean, you do not forget that, as I was saying, it is a heuristic tool. And so the results, however, is pretty clear. When you do all the Bayesian stuff, the result is the probability is quite high in favor of, and very high, in favor of the authenticity hypothesis. And for all the proposals, so, A proposal or for the B proposals. And you have also to take into account that thanks to this Bayesian reasoning, it was possible to illustrate the impact of our prejudices on the final probability. Because Bayesian probability is about the impact of evidence on prior probabilities to obtain a posterior probability. And in the most unfavorable case for authenticity, that is the 4B arguments that you can see there, you can see the upward trend of line as soon as you have a 20% prior probability in favor of the authenticity hypothesis. And when you have a 50% probability, you can see that you arrive immediately at the 90% probability. So, of course, I mean, heuristics and warranted belief differ from truth, as I was saying, and I emphasize this. I mean, it is a simplified and subjective. This is simplified, and this is a simplified and subjective argument map. Never forget this. But this conclusion, of course, it is also an advantage of this, but this conclusion might be reversed with some future extra pieces of evidence. That's the strength also of the Bayesian evaluation. And in conclusion, what can we say? We can say that we have shown that there is a vitality of the academic debate on the dating and the image formation process. And we can say that also, I would like to emphasize that we should promote articles in reputable peer-reviewed journals, not in predatory journals. That is my one thing. Maybe also controversial, I mean, saying, but I mean, I would go for this. And I tried always to publish in good peer-reviewed journals. And we have also analytical arguments that are now at our disposal that are useful in controversial interdisciplinary topics. And those analytical arguments can support the existence of a warrant, that is a hypothesis more likely than not, for the Shroud of Turin being the burial cloth of Jesus. And even, if you want a number, up to 99% probability for the authenticity hypothesis. Keep this in mind, and that is quite a challenging topic, quite an important topic, even when you are discussing with someone, with some skeptics, with someone you want to convince in an apologetic way of seeing things. So keep this in mind, and you can be sure that some people are really attracted by analytical arguments, and it's a good way of communicating with people that are not convinced by the authenticity hypothesis. So thank you for your attention.
We're ready for questions? So for your point on we should promote articles in reputable peer-reviewed journals, in a lot of those peer-reviewed journals, there is a clear naturalistic bias in the editorial board that makes it very difficult to get published. So what's your thoughts about getting past that, or at least addressing the lack of quote-unquote peer-reviewed articles?
Yeah, of course, there is this, what we can call naturalism bias in favor it does not play in favor of the authenticity. But that's why I insist that it is important to publish in those journals. If it was obvious to publish, in these journals, I won't insist on it. But I see so many researchers that who are attracted by publishing in an easy way. To publish in less reputable peer-reviewed journals, and maybe they are doing more harm than good to the research on the Shroud of Turin, because they are putting the credibility of the research into doubt. And that's maybe yes, of course, you are proud because you have published your article, but you should maybe have tried harder and try to do some harder work in order to convince some reputable journals to have your article published.
Tristan, thanks for coming and bringing your knowledge to the table here to us. I'm just wondering, have you a book published, or have you anything in the pipeline to be published?
No, I'm really focusing on publishing articles.
Okay.
That's my main goal. I published a book in 2016, only in French.
Only in French.
Yeah. It was a book doing a summary of all the academic research about the Shroud of Turin.
Okay.
But I did not go further. But maybe in the forthcoming years, I'm going to publish a book with all the researchers that I was able to.
Are your papers available in English, or are they?
Yeah, all the papers are available. If you go to academia.edu, you will find them.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I wonder if it might be possible to have articles prepared, let's say, based upon some research technique, but to, in that article, apply it as well to something other than the shroud, so that it shows that this approach is not simply applicable in this field, but by being associated with its value in other fields.
Yeah, that was
could introduce that result for the shroud.
Yeah, of course, and that was the reason why, for example, I chose this to apply in 2013 to apply this minimal facts approach that was already done by Michael Licona and Gary Habermas on the resurrection, to apply this specifically on the Shroud of Turin. So I used this approach that was already done and already accepted by the academic community as sound on the Shroud of Turin. And same thing with my new research that was published in Theology and Science in 2025, some months ago. It is, as I was saying, it is already the approach that was put forward by Douglas Walton in 2016.
Okay, that's one approach.
I've spent 40 years of my life in academia, and I have an unusual name that's obviously Polish. So when people meet me, they right away get it that I'm Polish, and then it follows that I'm either Jewish or Catholic. And this is difficult to say because I'm liberal, I vote Democrat, but the hostility to Christianity in academia cannot be underestimated. Yeah. I have attended staff meetings where professors bond with each other by opening with, rather than items on the agenda, mockery of Christian students. Christianity is equated with, conflated with obscurantism, superstition, backwardness, the KKK, Nazis.
Yeah.
And it's not funny, this is true. I have been told by potential employers, once they found out that I'm Catholic, they would not hire me for that reason, which is against the law. And I can document this. Even accepted facts, like that the consensus among historians is that Jesus was a real person who really lived, is rejected by my colleagues. Some of them insist that Jesus is Mithra, which is an idea that is mocked by serious scholars of myth and folklore, but that is disseminated as true. I have had conversations with Michael Shermer and Joe Nickel about the Shroud of Turin. Michael Shermer makes his living. He gets money by being a public atheist. He would talk to me about other topics. When it came to the Shroud of Turin, he just said, it's fake. I said, well, what about? It's fake. There's nothing to discuss. Joe Nickel just was a fire hose of hostility. I called him before giving a talk about the Shroud, and he started yelling and screaming at me and asking, how did you get my phone number? I was like, it's public knowledge. So the hostility of people who are from a variety of camps, some of them are Marxists, some of them are atheists, some of them just don't want to confront the idea that there's anything in the universe more important than they are. The hostility is never to be underestimated by scholars, by people who have dedicated their lives to truth.
Yeah, with my research, I could confirm some of the things in the 60s when they finally found the Pontius Pilate stone. They then admitted, okay, Pontius Pilate really exists, or existed. Prior to that, they didn't want him to really exist. Anyway, I want to propose a strategy. Perhaps if I earn your respect after my talk at 3 o'clock today, maybe I could contribute information for you to do an article connecting the environmental factors from 2,000 years ago. So we're not initially going in to get published under the Shroud, but environmental information, which then relates to the Shroud. So it's a possibility.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We got
maybe-
5 minutes left.
I agree totally with the lady that was talking about bias in academia. I do want to give a glimmer of hope as someone that's involved with the Discovery Institute and its academia program. I will say, as a scientist, I'm a chemist, I'm beginning to see in different areas of the sciences the ability to recognize that naturalistic means does not explain this world, and that's increasing. Now, not that we're still not facing huge bias, it's still there, but I'm seeing in certain areas of the scientific field, particularly around the models about, the concept behind intelligent design, that's starting to take some footholds, and there are students that have been through that institute's training that are starting to get tenure. So there's hope. I want you to know that there is an underlying flow that we see that has we still face a lot, but there's some things that are fundamentally changing, even as I try to go around and speak to various different organizations. There's a receptivity among the youth that is positive, and we're headed in a positive direction.
You are entirely right. I mean, and this is really a long-term trend that you can see in the academic, especially about the credibility of theism, since the revival of the arguments for theism that were done by analytic philosophers such as Alvin Plantinga, Richard Swinburne at Oxford, and William Lane Craig about the Kalam cosmological argument and the resurrection hypothesis. So, and you can have really, in these Anglo-Saxon world, this, you can see this. And that was, I mean, they played also an important role, for example, in my conversion. I was baptized at the age of 33. So thanks to them, because they showed me that there was credible, historical, solid, logically valid arguments in favor of theism and in favor of Christianity and in favor of the resurrection hypothesis as a historical event. So it is really a long trend that we are seeing since especially since the publications of Alvin Plantinga in the 70s, when he tried to put down all the Kant way of thinking and of saying that there is an internal contradiction when you are talking about the arguments in favor or against theism.
One last quick question, short one, please.
Tristan, all the information you received from the Freedom of Information Act, from the British Museum, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, how confident are you that, one, you've gone through them all and that enough has been said about everything that was there?
It's a very good question, and it will be the topic of my talk tomorrow at 10 a.m. So you will have some new evidence about the radiocarbon dating. I mean, if you can be there.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Tristan's going to answer in the hall outside, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much.